Welcome to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Joyous conversations about what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about our one reality. You have nothing to fear. You are eternal and you are perfectly loved. Knowing the truth changes everything. Now, here's Roberta.
Welcome to Seek Reality. I'm Roberta Grimes and I am thrilled that you are with us today. Oh, my dear friends, our guest this week is part of a wonderful summertime tradition here at Seek Reality. We like to help to promote the annual Spiritist event that is held in the United States at the end of the summer each year. And now, many people are familiar with spiritualism, which is a 19th century spirits-based, really religion that originated and it still is based in England. And it's pretty popular. It's growing in popularity in the U.S. too. Spiritism is something different. Spiritism also began in the 19th century, but it's based in the 19th century teachings of Allan Kardec. It's now very robustly based in Brazil, and it also has become a fairly rapidly growing spiritual movement, not so much a religion, spiritual movement in the United States as well. And the U.S. Spiritist Federation is holding its 19th annual Spiritist Convention on September 20th, 2025 at Weber's Boutique Hotel in Ann Arbor, Michigan. This one is called The Evolution of Consciousness, so it's right up our alley here. I think it's a great name, and we are delighted to help them get the word out each year, and we have our favorite ambassador at this point. This year, the U.S. Spiritist Federation has again sent us Peter Hayes, and that's at my personal request because we so much enjoyed talking with him. And I think, as I say, this is our fourth visit with him now. And the last few times he was here, I just found him to be so delightful. Peter Hayes works at the Spiritist group Love and Light in Newark, New Jersey. He's also the current outreach director of the United States Spiritist Federation, or USSF. He's an active participant in the Tri-State Spiritist Federation, which is TSSF. Peter has published several children's books with his wonderful wife, Betty Rosen, through their company, which is Semi Fronteiras Press, and with other publishers in Brazil, Colombia, and the U.S. Peter has an extensive background in theater, and he holds a Master of Fine Arts in Dramatic Writing from New York University. He also works in commercial real estate. Oh, Peter, I'm so glad to have you back. I really enjoyed talking with you. Welcome back to Seek Reality.
Thank you, Roberta. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's just dive in. But first, people are not necessarily familiar with Spiritism itself. I have to keep them distinct in my mind too. I have spoken at spiritualist churches in the past, but I've not attended a Spiritism convention, although there was one in Boston last year and I almost got to go to it. I just missed it. Talk about Allan Kardec a bit and what he taught.
Okay. What I'll do is, in talking about the 19th Annual Spiritist Symposium, which is, as you mentioned, the evolution of consciousness, path towards enlightenment. What it is a symposium that emphasizes evolution of consciousness from a Spiritist perspective. The way that is that, well, first of all, the U.S. Spiritist Symposium is going to be on Saturday, September 20th, from 8:30 in the morning until 4 p.m. in the afternoon, so it's a little earlier this year. And it's going to be made up of 7 talks and 3 panel discussions, which focus on various aspects of consciousness and what do we mean by consciousness. But the title, Evolution of Consciousness, is very much indicative of what Spiritism is about to begin with. When we think of evolution, we think of physical evolution, but what about spiritual evolution?
Which is important, which is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Right. So when we talk about the evolution of consciousness, it implies a process that takes time and happens slowly. Since Spiritism is a philosophy, religion, and science equally, is not a religion per se, but all three combined, it stresses the immortality of the soul. It stresses a belief in God and in the divine laws of God. And it also stresses not only Christianity and the teachings of Jesus, but it stresses reincarnation as the process through which the spirit evolves. And Spiritism stresses that evolution of the soul is why we're here. So with the evolution of the soul via reincarnation, it implies that we need more time than we might think we need in order to evolve in the first place. And that evolution of the spirit is what God wants of us. We may not know a lot of what God really wants from us, but certainly we can stress that the spiritual growth and evolution of consciousness is essential to our existence. So evolution of consciousness is very much done through a variety of ways. Reincarnation can be the engine of that. It also has to do with moral improvement. That's one reason why Spiritism stresses the teachings of Jesus, but also Spiritism in combining Christianity with Eastern religions and emphasizing a gradual evolution of the spirit and emphasizing more, shall we say, detachment from the material world. By detachment, I mean attachment in any way that can be a profound source of unhappiness. So, and as we move through our existence, as consciousness expands, as consciousness goes through a slow process of evolution, we not only learn how to detach more and more from the trappings of the spiritual world, but we also learn how to work on moral improvement, which in turn frees the spirit more and expands consciousness.
So
Go ahead.
What Alan Kardec taught then
Mm-hmm.
was that did he teach that this was kind of a religion, or did he teach that this was not a religion?
No, he was emphasizing that Spiritism is a philosophy, religion, and science combined. The idea is that knowledge comes out in different ways. Sometimes knowledge comes out through philosophy, certainly comes out through scientific inquiry, and it comes out through religion. And one of the great things about Spiritism is it tries to be very proactive and stressing that if we reach a point where science proves something to be incorrect that we thought was correct, we need to go with science. So it's really emphasizing that the pursuit of knowledge and an expansion of consciousness is essential, and it's an ongoing process. So what Spiritism really advocates avoiding are dogmas, because in dogma, we lock ourselves into right. We lock ourselves into a belief system and we just stay there. So that's not what Spiritism advocates at all.
Yes. So do you hold Sunday services?
We don't do rituals at a typical Spiritist center. We do study groups. So we do a variety of study groups that focus on different aspects of Spiritism. The evolution of consciousness is certainly part of that. And then there are also talks, or you could say lectures, in Portuguese, because you mentioned there are a lot of Brazilians who are involved in Spiritism. The word for a lecture is palestra. So, but it's the same thing. It's basically a talk on a different aspect of Spiritism, and the subjects vary enormously. If you ever have a chance to watch the Spiritism Talk series on the website for the United States Spiritist Federation, we do a weekly talk called Spiritism Talk Series, and we're up to over 200 30 episodes at this point, and there's on a variety of topics. They can be topics that are more religious and based, more scientific and based, more philosophical and based. But again, at the end of the day, it's Spiritism is stressing that religion, science, and philosophy all play a very essential role in shaping our identity.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Something else I can mention is that this year's symposium, the 19th U.S. Spiritist Symposium, because the title's The Evolution of Consciousness, A Path Toward Enlightenment, it also stresses another aspect of Spiritism. There's a program we do on the United States Spiritist Federation's channel called Psychology and Spirituality, which is based on the works of a spirit named Joanna de Angelis. She had a long-term relationship with Divaldo Franco, who's one of Brazil's most famous mediums. Unfortunately, Divaldo Franco passed away last month in May at the age of 98, I believe it was. So he lived a long life, traveled all over the world multiple times, did thousands of presentations, and he psychographed many, many books, over 200, I think around 260 of them easily. And he did several with a spirit named Joanna de Angelis. So what I'm mentioning is Joanna de Angelis stresses a lot of her works on psychology. So the Spiritist program that we do on the United States Spiritist Federation's channel, Psychology and Spirituality, is very much influenced by the works of Joanna de Angelis. Joanna de Angelis stresses again and again and again in her work that consciousness matters. So one way to describe her work is that it embraces psychology, again, a scientific part of Spiritism, as well as a spiritual part of Spiritism. Mm-hmm. And also she stresses a great deal the works of Carl Jung. So the evolution of consciousness in the symposium is going to talk about not only reincarnation, it will talk about moral improvement, but also the emphasis that humanity as a whole needs to improve and that this is possible. If we think about how has humanity improved? Well, we certainly have made all kinds of breakthroughs in science over the last 400 years, but a lot in the last 150 years alone. Mm-hmm. And in addition to that, even though we have current problems in the world is relatively more peaceful, generally speaking, now than it has been historically, especially if we take into consideration the current size of just under 8 billion people on the planet.
Right.
Right? So Spiritism is very optimistic this way in emphasizing the evolution of humanity. There are books, again, by Divaldo Franco, who was, as a medium, psychographed these books, from a spirit named Filomeno de Miranda, that talk about the regeneration of the planet. This is a process of spiritual evolution, evolution of consciousness, if you will, that has been happening for some time and will continue to happen. But that, generally speaking, what God wants of us and is, that we're working for is to improve, to become more tolerant of one another, more compassionate towards one another, to emphasize fraternity, charity, and so forth. In the Spirits book, which is the first book of the 5 essential books to Spiritism, there's a third part of the Spirits book called the natural laws, which are basically the divine laws that come from God. I can say more about that in a moment, but what I want to get to is that in that section of the Spirits book, one of the questions asked is, what are the biggest obstacles to our progress? Answer: pride and selfishness. So if we think about how much people act out of pride, the negative sense of pride, or act out of selfishness in some way, how much does that delay humanity's progress, and how much is it often the root cause of many problems in the world? So,
Yeah, I could quite a
yeah,
bit, I would say. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. That's exactly the point. Because when we talk about the evolution of consciousness, we're working gradually toward becoming less selfish and less prideful. And again, just to emphasize this, when I say pride, I mean the negative sense of pride. We do need the positive sense of pride, for self-esteem. We need that. The ego, we need to have a healthy ego. But when we have a distorted ego, if we're arrogant, if we refuse to listen to people, if we think we can do no wrong, if we want to keep charging ahead into the dark, all examples of negative pride, that of course holds us back.
Yes.
And, right. So part of what the symposium is, I think, diving into is the ways in which a lack of evolution can be a profound source of unhappiness. And that the more we work towards expanding our consciousness through the teachings of Jesus's ministry of love, through our awareness of philosophy, our awareness of science, how we navigate getting through our material lives each and every day, all of that helps us to expand consciousness. And one of the things that the evolution of consciousness is stressing is that we always have to be willing to look at ourselves, and try to be as impartial to that process as possible, which means what? We need to have humility.
Yeah, very much
Doesn't mean
so.
everything we do is bad, but we all have work to do. And really, the symposium this year is stressing that we're all works in progress. Now, if I may play devil's advocate for just a teensy-weensy moment, suppose somebody doesn't like reincarnation. They say, well, if we have reincarnation, then people get lazy. They'll figure, I'll just come back next time and do it then.
Yeah,
Well,
the first
yes,
council of Nicaea said we can't have
we
reincarnation
can't have
for that very
reincarnation.
reason.
My
People
goodness.
think they can keep coming back. They don't have to work hard each time because they'll keep coming back. Yeah.
However, I
Yeah.
beg to differ on that point. It's true, we have free will. Spiritism stresses a great deal the role of free
Right.
will in the evolution of our consciousness. That's true. But is it also true that the more we continue to move through the journey we're on, the more many of us, perhaps most of us, want to do a little better today than we did yesterday? How often do people feel motivated to try to, make a difference in the world, to try to improve? We see this all the time, right? Um, so one thing
And
that's
for the fact we know reincarnation happens, so to try to decide we're just going to write it out of the Bible, you can't, right? In fact, they tried to write it out of the Gospels. They just didn't get all of it.
right,
That's the way it
right.
is.
And it makes one of the arguments in favor of reincarnation is imagine if all of us only have one life and that's it. How are we possibly going to accomplish everything that we're capable of
We have
accomplishing?
a learner life, and that's you're saying all you get is your learner life. Okay, I can do it. No, I can do it, but that's all you got.
Right, exactly. So the symposium this year, the 19th U.S. Spiritist Symposium in Ann Arbor, Michigan, by the way, at the
Yes,
Weber.
it's good to keep repeating it, right?
I will repeat it, yes, shamelessly. What it stresses is that that we're here to learn. Everything we go through in life is a learning opportunity. Even if we feel like we're stagnant, we're not going anywhere, well, we learn from that too. But that's why in stressing reincarnation as part of the engine for the evolution of consciousness, it means what? That we need a much longer period of time in which we can use our free will wisely or we can use it unwisely, but we have the time to develop our free will in all sorts of ways. And the more we develop our free will wisely, of course, the more we learn how to be more evolved spiritually. And
This is
again,
why I
yeah,
think Spiritism is so interesting
mhm,
because it treats each life as a fresh start.
mhm,
We learn, we grow, we come back, we have a fresh start. Now, you don't have a conscious memory of that past lifetime, but what you learned in that past lifetime still is stored in
mhm,
your past life repository, if you will, and
correct.
it helps you to make a better start of this fresh new lifetime that you're living. And that is a very important part of Spiritism. Now,
Yes.
now I'm going to grow even more.
Hmm.
And that's what you teach in Spiritism, which I think is terrific. That's because it's
Yes.
true. That's what it's for.
Right.
And the other Christian related teaching sort of systems ignore that. Even though
Mm.
it's such an important part of being alive on Earth, they ignore it.
Well, in stressing reincarnation as the process, and as you just said, if we come back and are basically starting anew, we haven't unlearned anything we learned before. We may not remember it. It could be dormant,
But it's there. It's a base
but it's
for
still
growth.
there. It can be
Yeah,
drawn upon under the right circumstances.
right.
And the reason for having the blinders on, so to speak, is that it helps us to use our free will more effectively.
And
Imagine,
you're also not trying to go back and adjust what happened in past lives. Those
correct,
people aren't there. You can't fix anything you did in the past.
right,
You're going forward, but with this repository of general knowledge that you gained
mhm,
in the past, which is so important,
right.
really, for future
And
growth.
right. And so when we come back, we may be coming back through more of an expiatory experience, meaning there's something we need to work on
Mhm.
that's more of an obligation, but it could also be more of a trial. Sometimes trial and expiation overlap a great deal, but the point is that with a trial, it's more an opportunity to learn something. It could be a struggle we go through. If we think of any struggle we go through, we could ask ourselves, is this more of a trial? Is it more of an expiation? Is it something, a consequence of something I did before? Maybe. It may be a combination of the two. Sometimes it's not that important to really distinguish between which is which, unless it's more clear to us. But at the same time, as we go through these types of experiences, all of that is part of us developing and expanding our consciousness. And again, developing our consciousness, evolving our consciousness is essential because the more we can do that, the more we become our fullest potential, which then helps us to lead existences that are certainly happier, but also existences that are more in harmony with divine law.
Right.
Uh, the U.S. Spiritist Symposium this year is also going to touch to some extent on aspects of divine law. When I say divine law, what I mean by that is there's two general types of laws. There are the physical laws that come from God, which science can study and does. Then there's the immoral laws, which are sometimes more elusive at times to study. But
Mhm.
when we think about the process of reincarnation, what we go through for every action, there's a reaction that has a moral component to it. And so uh, whatever we're going through now, if it's a reaction of some kind to our past, then what it is essentially a pathway towards us learning how to overcome the trials that we are facing so that as we continue to evolve, then we start to connect more and more to God. And what does it mean to connect to God? Well, that's a
Yeah.
tough one. But because we have some idea of what that might be like, but there's so much we don't know. but it's really stressing that it's an ongoing process. And also, Spiritism stresses that we're now the best we've ever been right now. If we think about the journey that our spirit has been on from the time it began, whenever that was, up to now, we are doing the best we've ever done, and we will get better as we continue in the future. Even if we use our free will to slack off for a while, we just kind of coast along, and then finally we get tired of that, and then we want to, make decisions. We want to expand our consciousness in such a way that we're able to continue our spiritual progress in a hopefully more personally rewarding way, but in more profound ways.
Yeah, I think the fact that we have had reincarnation going on for thousands of years and we have been growing spiritually is an important, very important point. Someone asked me about demons. Well, was that all folklore, Jesus casting out demons? I said, well, it was not. Well, why don't we have demons now? Well, an important point. We are more developed spiritually than people who were developed 2,000 years ago. And therefore, we have much more armor against being attacked by demons. And so they're just not in the world as much as they were back then.
Right. When we think about the evolution of consciousness, it's also important to stress that it's for everybody. It's not some people and other people, it doesn't apply.
It's evolving worldwide, yes.
Right. We're evolving worldwide. All of us are equal in the eyes of God in that we have the same equal opportunity to try to work on our spiritual progress. Now, how quickly we do that varies enormously from one person to the next. When Jesus cast out, they use the word demons. The way Spiritism understands that is that Jesus certainly was a medium, and he was removing a spirit that was obsessing a person. When we talk about spirit obsession, for instance, this too is related to, there's actually one section of the symposium that talks about mediumship and its role in the evolution of consciousness. And the idea, in part, is that we're all mediums, some ostensive mediums, others maybe, not so much, but certainly through intuition, we can get inspiration. And as mediums, all of us have the capacity to receive inspiration from the other side, because Spiritism stresses the relationship between the physical world and the non-physical world and how the two are often interacting with each other. So when we talk about spiritual obsession, it is possible that a spirit will try to influence us and manipulate us.
Yes.
Now, that happens because we allow it to happen. An important point about spiritual obsession is that it happens due to the flaws in our own personality. So, again, going back to the theme of evolution of consciousness, the more we become aware of who we are, what our strengths are, and what our weaknesses are, the more we're open to self-improvement, the more we strengthen ourselves. It's like we fortify ourselves and the environment around us. That way, spirits that might want to try and manipulate us will not be able to, because we have enough fortification within ourselves. To be cute about it, you could say it's our spiritual firewall, if you will.
That's right. That becomes much stronger. Yeah.
Right. So it basically what it means from a psychological perspective is the more we have a stronger sense of self, the more we embrace humanity, the more we know how to set emotional boundaries for ourselves. And this is all related again to evolution of consciousness and ways. The symposium is also going to do a kind of a how-to section or practical suggestions on how to expand consciousness, meditation, prayer, and much more than that. But again, Jesus was able to remove a spirit from somebody who did not have a lot of consciousness but that was 2,000 years ago. You can
Right.
imagine.
Exactly.
Is
But
your
that's the
point.
point. This was a much bigger problem back then because people were not nearly so developed spiritually back then.
Yes.
One of the reasons he came was to help us learn how to become more developed spiritually.
Right.
I mean, it's amazing how wonderfully all of this fits together. Isn't that
Mhm.
beautiful? It's so
It
beautiful
does.
to
It
see.
does. I should also mention that the U.S. Spiritist Symposium every year has a very big and important program for children and youth. What they're going to call it is Shining Our Inner Light, Learning, Love, Kindness, and Gratitude. So it's a program. So if
Wow.
parents come in and they bring their children or their youth with them, the children and youth can participate in a separate program. So this is not just a program for adults only.
And for what ages are these?
Um, is approximately 5, 6 years old, all the way up to teenagers and young adults.
That's wonderful. Okay, that's very important. So if you want your children to have a healthy introduction to these ideas
Mhm.
in a spiritual way, this is an ideal way to do that.
Yeah, they also work with children that are even younger than 5. But generally speaking, in terms of participating in some of the activities, there's also a presentation at the end from children and youth that they do for everybody, which can be a lot of fun. And in the past, one of the more engaging parts of the symposium that many people have responded positively is there's been a youth panel made up of youth who are reflecting on some of the issues today that young people are going through, and certainly how that fits into our spiritual journey, evolution of consciousness, and so forth.
One of the things I want to make sure you do is to show the books that you and your wife have written and that are primarily for children and young people. Do you
Mhm.
have some of those so you could just show us some of those books?
Well, I don't have them with me at the moment, I'm afraid, but if one goes to www.semfronteras, SEMFRONTEIRAS press.com, you can see our books there. Uh,
Okay, I'll make sure that that's in the notes.
okay.
Good.
But, and we will be, we'll have our books there at the symposium. We usually do that every year, as well as there are books on Spiritism that people can purchase at the symposium as well. There's the great thing nowadays is that there are easily about 200 books in English on Spiritism that are available. So there's plenty to study.
Yeah.
There's the 5 essential books of Spiritism that were developed and produced by Allan Kardec. Allan Kardec, by the way, collaborated with higher level spirits on the other side to produce the 5 essential books on Spiritism. So, one of the things Spiritism is about, I think, is stressing that knowledge comes, that it's a rather democratic process. It's not all about the teachings of one individual or anything like that. So Spiritism does not have gurus or a single entity or a single individual who bestows all knowledge on us. It's more the idea that knowledge comes from the other side, and when it's genuine knowledge, that it will stand the test of time. What
Right.
was true in the past will be true today and will be true tomorrow.
Right.
Uh,
That's another thing I really like about it. It incorporates these teachings, which all fit together. They're all te essentially um, the Buddha and Jesus taught essentially the same things in just
yes,
at different times in different ways, but the same teachings. They don't
yes,
conflict with one
exactly.
another really at all. They
Right,
just came different cultural ways. And
exactly.
that is what is truly beautiful about Spiritism. It's just trying to help people raise their spiritual vibration
Very
using
much. Mhm.
whatever speaks to you, that works for you. That's what you can follow, and it will get you to the same place. That's what's
Right.
beautiful about
Because
Spiritism.
because Spiritism stresses that we don't really die. I mean, if you think of the spirit as being immortal, yes, the body only lives for so long and lasts for so long,
Mm-hmm.
but that we have an existence both here on earth and an existence on the other side. And through the process of reincarnation, it's a back and forth. But that what we experience on the other side is just as important, some would argue more important than what we go through here.
Well, it is important. It's just
Mhm.
different.
It's
There,
different. And,
yes. We,
and,
we,
and the
we
reason for
come
why.
here to get intensive
Mhm,
teaching, often in sort of shocking ways, in alarming and painful, in jolting ways, and then we go back there to consolidate it with what,
mhm,
because we have left. It's hard to estimate, but probably we left 60% of our greater minds back there. We
mhm,
go back there, we consolidate with our greater minds,
mhm.
and we put it all together. And once we have it all put together, we think, gee, it's time to go back and get another, go to school again. And
To go to school again, exactly. So,
Craig Hogan calls the Earth School.
mhm.
And that's a very good way to put it. That's what
Yeah,
each incarnation is.
right. And Spiritism stresses that too, that, here on earth, like the family is like a big school, the type
Yeah.
of family we incarnate into
Yes.
is a big school. And it's really emphasizing that, even when we get bogged down in problems and life is stressful and overwhelming and all the things we go through, they're
Oh,
also,
good. This is hard. That's what it's supposed to
this is
be. It
hard.
was
It's
supposed
supposed
to
to be
be
hard.
hard.
Yes. But
Yes.
if we can hang in there, we will get better at it and we'll be able to handle it more easily.
That's right.
Think
That's
about things that, I mean, just in one lifetime, if we think about things that used to bother us enormously and maybe now not so much, that's progress. Um,
yeah,
so,
exactly right.
mhm.
No, I think Spiritism fits beautifully with where just about everybody is when they're here. This is a very good way to consolidate what we're learning, to get the most out of what we're learning, to work on what we're learning while we're here. It works beautifully. And
Yes, and our life here in the material world is not something to be ashamed of, or, we're not here to shun the material world either. Rather, the material world is a tool, a very big, complex tool, but a
yeah,
tool nonetheless, in which everything we interact with here in the physical world helps us to learn. Of course,
right.
it can be sources of all kinds of problems, but that's in part how we use our free will, how
Yeah,
what our attitude is. If I think that money is the only thing that's going to make me matter as an individual, rather than seeing money as a worthwhile tool that I can learn a great deal from, then I can experience the world very differently. Uh, so
yeah.
Spiritism certainly stresses that. It's not, and by the way, I don't think Spiritism has a monopoly on this type of perspective at all. But it's certainly, this is why the evolution of consciousness is really important, because the more we develop our consciousness spiritually, the more how we experience this world here and how we experience life on the other side can be, shall we say, more harmonious, hopefully happier. And even if we go through difficult moments, rocky, bumpy moments, we have enough um, consciousness that we learn how to handle these things more easily.
It works. Bring all the mess that you learned or that you put together on this life and bring it home to the other side, as you say, and
Right.
you get to put it all together with what you've learned in other lifetimes, and
Right.
it all fits together, and it's amazing. You'll be glad you had those experiences here because they all are grist for that mill, and you grow so much more spiritually from what the things you learned here. It's
And in giving us the capacity to evolve spiritually, it's like what God is saying is God is giving us compassionate opportunity to, if we make mistakes, and of course we're going to make lots and lots and lots of them,
Passionate
get another
opportunity.
chance. We get
Yeah,
another.
wonderful.
But it's also important to emphasize, yes, we get another chance, but it's up to us. It's our personal responsibility to
Right.
make that we do something with the chances that we have.
Yeah. So
Uh,
beautifully said, my dear. Well, we're coming near the end of our time. What do you want people to take away from our time together this time?
okay. Well, I hope people, if they can get to Ann Arbor, Michigan, they can attend the U.S. Spiritist Symposium. Again, Saturday, September 20th of 2025. But I think even if one can't, and the thing I want to stress the most is that it's really important for all of us to practice mindfulness as much as possible and put into practice what it means to try to evolve spiritually. Now, what do I mean by that? In other words, if we know that it's important for us to learn how to be compassionate, how to be more patient with people, how to forgive, there's different levels of forgiveness. If we think about the essential universal teachings of Jesus, then the more we put this into practice, the more we can also connect to a journey that's much, much longer than just this one lifetime. I think a lot of people stress out if they think about, oh my God, I've only got a few more years left, that I'm going to die and nothing, it's all for nothing.
Yeah.
Um, and Spiritism is stressing that's not true at all. You
No,
know,
no.
we're just a tiny little moment right here, and the journey is much, much bigger. And I think when you internalize that perspective, it just makes things a lot easier to cope with overall. Of course, we have bad days. We lose our temper. We panic about certain things, but we always have to connect to the long-term view and not be short-sighted in our hearts.
Yeah, very well said. It's important to know too that Spiritism truly is where whatever your country is of residency is right now, it's worldwide, right?
It's worldwide, and also I think it's important to stress that Spiritism is not asking anybody to give up their religious background if they, regardless of the religious background. I think Spiritism can dovetail rather nicely into one's existing religion if one is open-minded enough about it. Because at the end of the day, it's about spiritual evolution. Um,
But
or
on
should,
the other hand, if you many people are leaving their original religion because they don't find it satisfying.
Mhm,
And Spiritism is freer, and at the same time it's a lot meatier.
mhm.
So I think a lot of the people who have come to me and said, what do I do? Because I love, this is what a lot of people say. I love Jesus. I don't love Christianity. What do I do?
Well, that's a good point because there's a difference between Christianity itself, which is a beautiful religion and has a lot to offer, versus how it gets practiced or how it gets interpreted.
Right.
And
And a lot
that's
of people are leaving those pews,
right,
but they want to keep Jesus. And a
right.
wonderful way to do that is to look up Spiritism, not spiritualism, Spiritism.
Yeah.
And the in the notes to this podcast, you can find out how you can do that and see what you can find locally to your side.
Spiritism is a little different from spiritualism. They certainly have things in common. And I by no means want to suggest that Spiritism is better than spiritualism or
You're
spiritualism is
so
better than
humble,
Spiritism.
my darling. You
Yeah.
certainly are
But
humble.
But there is some differences in terms of the perspective. There's an emphasis in Spiritism on reincarnation, for instance,
Yeah,
but both do address the subject of mediumship, for instance. They have different perspectives on that as well.
yeah.
Uh, but um, but again, Spiritism is inviting all of us to really connect to and reflect on why we're here, and that there is a reason why we're here. It's not just random. If I'm not mistaken, scientists get a little impatient with the idea that the interpretation of physical evolution is it's all randomness. That's not what it is at all. It may at times be random, but then as cells come together and as they evolve and as genes are passed down, there does start to be a little more intent behind it as well, in terms of the way the genes pass. I don't want to get into that subject too much because it's not really the point of today's talk, but what I'm getting at is sometimes on the subatomic level, or at least on the day-to-day level, things can feel random and kind of meaningless, but then when you pull back a little bit, there is purpose, even if it's chaotic, at the day-to-day level, or can be.
Well, we've used up actually much more of our time than we had wanted to, but I wanted to really talk a lot about this topic. And stay right where you are. I just have to tell everyone who our guest will be next week, which actually carries on rather nicely from what we've talked about today. And there will be in the notes enough for you to be able to find what you need to find if you want to talk more about Spiritism. But anyway, this has certainly been fun. However, we've come to the end of our time, my dear friends. This has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes, and I'm very glad you could be with us today. Please never forget that you are a powerful, eternal being. You never began, you never will end. And when you really get everything that means, it's going to change everything in your life, always and eternally for the better. Now, next week, our guest will be Debbie Dobbins. And she'll be here to talk about her book, which is called Your Inner Billionaire. We were just talking about wealth and how it fits with all of this. Because, wow, I've just started to read her book, which is interesting and even perhaps important. It's not about getting money for the sake of money, but rather it's about gratitude and abundance and how to discover what amounts to wealth as a spiritual aspect of your life. Debbie tells us that prosperity is our birthright, and that in fact, understanding that changes everything in our lives. It doesn't necessarily make us richer, but it makes us more spiritual. Oh my goodness. Join us, please, next week as we look together at what we had been thinking of as just the material side of life in a whole new and a much deeper and more spiritual way. And this week, we've been talking with Peter Hayes, who has been with us for the fourth time. Peter and his Spiritism discussion has become a summertime tradition for us here at Seek Reality. He joins us in June or July of every year to talk about the upcoming Spiritist Symposium, it comes along in the United States in the late summer, and it's always in a different place. The 19th Annual Spiritist Convention or Symposium will be called The Evolution of Consciousness, and it happens on September 20th, 2025 at Weber's Boutique Hotel in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Peter Hayes is always an interesting guest. He talks to us, as you see, in a humble, gentle way about what is a fascinating and rapidly growing movement in the U.S., because Spiritism really, I think, talks to us where we are now. It talks to us about where we're going spiritually as a people, as a species. And as you have seen, Peter is always a lovely, lively guest. We should just mention, of course, Craig Hogan, who is the president and guru of Seek Reality Online and also very spiritual. Just go to Seek Reality. I've been talking so much I can't talk anymore. SeekReality.com and discover what it's like where you and I are going to go, and we are going to party hardy there like you cannot imagine, because Spiritism, spiritualism, and the afterlife, all of it is so much fun. That's something that they don't tell you in church, do they? But we could tell you that here. But that's all I can really talk about now. So let's just close this by saying this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Please enjoy and make the most of this coming week in all of our one reality. There is only one reality, and it's gigantic, and it's beautiful, and it's made by God for you in particular. You are a powerful, eternal being, and you, most of all, in this entire universe, you are infinitely, eternally, and perfectly loved.
You've been listening to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Roberta blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. Join us every week as we explore what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about the one reality we all share. Knowing the truth changes everything.